Welcome. I'm so glad y'all are here today. I'm happy to have you join me. And thanks for spending your lunch period with me today. I'm here to talk to you about the impact of trauma on brain development. My name is Donna Anderson. I'm from Fort Bend County Behavioral Health Services. I'm one of their newer members to the family there. And I'm here as a project coordinator for an incredible grant that we received. I want to tell you just very quickly and briefly about the grant that we received. It's called Texas Change in Mind Learning Collaborative. It's funded by the Episcopal Health Foundation and the Powell Foundation. Social Current and Alliance for Strong Families provided the grant for us, which we are so privileged to be a part of. And their goal is to make sure that our country thrives best when everyone is able to reach their potential. And that's what we're going to try to do, is try to give everybody that opportunity. The other organizations involved in this grant are numerous ones. There are 10 of us within southeastern Texas. You can see there's New Hope Housing, Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Houston, Children's Museum, Santa Maria. So we have a lovely group that is working diligently to get the word out about trauma and brain development. So what is our main purpose for this grant? Well, we want everyone to understand the effect of trauma. We want to communicate the information about how the brain develops. We want to translate that brain science into programs, practices, and policies. We want to increase the understanding of the interventions that can be done to help those with adverse childhood experiences and hopefully improve the outcomes of the children and the families in Fort Bend County. So what is brain science? Brain science is a fabulous topic that is of great importance today. It's been studied for years, but of really high importance now. And our understanding is becoming clearer and clearer of how our brain is developed and what affects this development. Most importantly, the experiences we have are what develop the architecture of our brain. Our experiences actually shape us. So I want you to look a little bit at the brain. Now, I'm going to say right off the bat, I'm not a neuroscientist. As I've said before, I am an elementary teacher by trade. So I'll explain this to you on a very elementary explanation. Within our brain, we have the different areas or lobes within the brain. Each lobe does have a specific purpose, and that is where certain areas of that, within that area, certain skills are developed. For example, if you see the blue area, the frontal lobe, you can see that that's where we have the ability to make decisions and decide if something is helpful or harmful to us. And we can determine if we have to suppress socially inappropriate behaviors. That is essential for how we contribute to society and how we participate in society. The parietal lobe, where we understand how we interpret our surroundings, what we have in our space, how we feel within our space, whether we're feeling pressure, pain, heat, cold. So this is part of that section of the brain. The occipital lobe is where we process our visual information. Get visual cues, it goes into our brain and we try to interpret, what are we seeing, what is it? Cerebellum is part of the most primitive part of the brain that helps us with balance and motor skills. And the temporal lobe, that is where we have the perception of sound and interpreting sound, the ability to recognize objects and to understand the visual memory of those objects. So if all of these different things are happening in different parts of the brain, the important thing is that when we activate that certain part of the brain, is it communicating to the rest of the brain? Let's take an example of a telephone call. You're on the phone with one of your best friends, and all of a sudden it gets staticky. And through that static, you're losing a connection and you can't hear everything and you're getting bits and pieces. If every part of the brain is not working correctly, you're going to get bits and pieces and you're going to have static. Also, when you're on that phone with your good friend, if the static gets bad enough, you may lose connection. This also can happen, to lose connection within those different parts of the brain. So let's talk a little bit about these three important areas that are most affected by trauma. The prefrontal cortex, as you can see up at the top, is where we have our rational thinking, and it regulates our emotions. So anything that comes to us, we can regulate and we can try to make sense of what we're seeing. The amygdala and the hippocampus is where we're first going to have something. So I'm going to show you. Here I have my hand, and let's say the bottom part of my hand, which we're referring to as the bottom part of the brain, the amygdala. That's where, when something happens, we call this like the smoke alarm. If we're faced with a situation that's frightening, our alarm goes off. We get frightened. Our heart starts to race. We're in danger and we don't know what to do. And so we're not making rational decisions at that moment because it's so highly affected at that point in time. Now, the hippocampus will then help us try to differentiate, is this a past experience? Is this a present? How are we interpreting this? And most importantly, the prefrontal cortex, hopefully the top part of the brain, is going to come down and calm down that bottom part of the brain and say, okay, stop. Think about it. Realize what's real. Realize what is actually happening. If you don't have the top part of the brain covering the bottom and helping the bottom to function, then you're going to be in this state of shock, in this state of flight and fright without assistance. I'll give you an example of how this works. Let's say you're driving down the street and somebody pulls in front of you and nearly knocks you. And so, of course, here we go. Amygdala kicks up. You're probably, I hope not saying too many bad words, but you're fussing at the person that just pulled out in front of you and you're thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And you might even be frightened as to what they're going to do. Hopefully, then, your prefrontal cortex is going to come in and the top part of the brain is going to tell the bottom part, settle down. You need to make good choices. Probably the best choice is just slow down, back off, stay away from that individual, especially in today's society. It wouldn't be a good idea to pull up beside them and start shaking your finger at them. But your top part of your brain is going to come in and it's going to make the difference and try to help you make a rational and good decision. So how does the brain change? What's happening when we say the architecture of the brain? Well, experiences build that architecture, and our experiences shape us. Good experiences cause good connections in the brain. Negative experiences cause negative connections, lack of connections in the brain. The greater number of traumatic experiences we have, the greater the damage can happen to our brain. I want to share with you a video, to better describe the architecture. Well, excuse me again. Hold on just a second. There we go.
Modern science now tells us a great deal about how brains are built in childhood. Did you know that early childhood experiences actually change our brains in ways that affect our health throughout our lives?
We have a very rich and really science of the early childhood development, and particularly how early experiences affect long-term outcomes, learning as well as critical health. We also have a huge amount of new research helping us understand how adversity early in life, and particularly the positive stress that children can experience, into the body. Actually affects the development of the brain.
So experiences we have in our earliest years affect how our brains get built. That's important because the basic structures we develop as infants lay the foundation for more complex structures that develop as we grow. Just as a house needs a sturdy foundation to support the walls and roof, a brain needs a good base to support our future development. Positive interactions between young children and their caregivers literally build the architecture of their developing brain, provide a sturdy base for a lifetime. On the other hand, if a child experiences a pile-up of negative experiences, such as abuse or neglect, and if no caregiver is there to provide support, a sturdy brain foundation may never develop. That can lead to lifelong learning difficulties and health problems, including addiction and mental illness.
So, what the science is telling us is that we ignore the early years and help.
It's amazing to think that the experiences we have in our earliest years can affect our health for a lifetime. Since strong societies are made up of healthy individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all kids have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need to build healthy brains and bodies.
So if you look at this triangle, he was referring to adverse childhood experiences, negative things that happened to you as a child. This can build up to disrupting the neurodevelopment, as I was mentioning about making the connections in all part of the brain working together, which then leads to social, emotional, and cognitive impairments, some of them lasting a lifetime, which then leads to an adaptation of negative, risky behaviors, which then can lead to causes of behavior of very negative social problems and behavior problems. And believe it or not, it can even lead to an early death. So we say adverse childhood experiences. I'm sorry, y'all, be patient with me here. ACEs are what we call adverse childhood experiences. I want to give you a little better description of what ACEs are.
What we do, such as diabetes, if you just found so far the children only helps for a healthier, more successful life. That's because positive experiences in trauma help build stronger foundations like in healthier brains. And healthier brains lead to greater emotional well-being, greater success in school, and brighter future. Negative experiences like living in a house with verbal or physical abuse, sick or divorced parents, or emotional neglect, create toxic stress that can hinder a child's brain development and lead to those unhealthy outcomes that we talk about. We've all heard of stress, but what makes stress toxic? When the weight from all of the diverse childhood experiences we mentioned builds up, it can become too much to bear and affect how children look at the world. We call those experiences ACEs for short. Leaves you wondering why you've probably never heard of ACEs before. ACEs are common, but talking about them is not. In fact, 2 out of 3 patients surveyed have at least one ACE, but they may not know how that ACE score is affecting them or their family. That's because a person with a high ACE score doesn't win. As the number of ACEs increases, so does the risk for negative health outcomes. A score of 5 or more on the survey raises the chance of developing severe health concerns in adulthood to 55%. And those with 6 or more ACEs can die on average 20 years earlier than those with no ACEs at all. Sounds scary, but the worst part, parents with high ACE scores are more likely to have children with high scores too. And it can lead to behavioral issues, school failure, and physical and mental health. But even if you have a high ACE score, there's good news. Because now you know, and now you can change the direction of your life and help others understand. Thank you.
So we say ACEs are the negative experiences. She mentioned a couple of them, but let me go a little bit more detail of what a child might have been a part of, might have observed, or might have experienced. It might be emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, any substance abuse in the household, parental separation, divorce. The child's been bullied, feels unloved, has a lack of family support, witnessed violence. These are examples of ACEs. You can count and see how many maybe that child has experienced, or look at yourself and say how many. The important thing is this. You may look at that and go, oh my goodness, I have 3 of these. Is there something wrong with me? Well, the important thing is, it's been mentioned all along, you need support, a supportive adult. Maybe you experienced 1 or 2 or a few of these or some of these, but if you had the support of a loving and caring figure that was there to help you and guard you and get you through the difficulties, you may not have the difficult problems with brain negative development. That can happen. But if you didn't have the support, remember, the most severe things that can happen are lifelong impairments, physical and behavioral health, poor educational achievement, lack of economic productivity, increased stress, anger, impulsivity. Remember, not able to control, not able to make good decisions, lack of effective coping and problem solving. You know that 90% of the children who are in residential treatment centers have severe, complex trauma. These poor, vulnerable children that have come from bad places may have such severe trauma that they have loss of brain cells, damage to brain cell connections, hyperactivity of certain parts of the brain, shrinking of parts of the brain, delay in brain maturation, and of course, the lack of ability to self-regulate. What's important to know is that all of these things may have happened. All of these things might be experiences within that childhood, who now may be an adult. Those of you who are working with maybe clients or patients or children or individuals, family members, understand the experiences that they've had. The experiences have molded who they are. The experiences have molded their behavior. And because of the way their brain is working, that's why they have that behavior. It's important to look at them as someone who's had something happen bad to them. What happened to you? Not what is wrong with you? What are you doing? What is your problem? We need to change our mind, which is what my collaborative is about with the grant that I'm working on. Try to change that mind to think about what happened to you instead of what's wrong with you. I'll give you an example for a child. Let's say you're a teacher. You have your classroom's getting ready to go to PE, so you tell everybody to line up, and you say, Johnny, get in line. And he looks at you and says, no. And you think, well, he's not usually defiant. And you say, Johnny, get in line. Get in the middle of the line right now. Scoot in there. Get in line. No. Johnny, behave, get in line. And the next thing you know, he's screaming and he's running out of the room. And you think, what is wrong with you, Johnny? Why are you acting this way? What's your problem? Well, come to find out, Johnny had been severely sexually and physically abused. He does not like to be surrounded by individuals, especially stuck in the middle of a line with somebody right in front of him and right behind him. It panics him. It puts him back in that same mode of danger back here without the control. So when she realized this, she decided from now on, Johnny goes to the end of the line where he can step back if he needs to. We call him the caboose, and he has the important role to make sure we all get where we're going. Never had that problem in the line again, because she understand what had happened to him was what was important. This book is one of my favorites of all time. It's What Happened to You. It was written by Bruce Perry, a PhD, and Oprah Winfrey, believe it or not. And it looks at some of the experiences people have had who've had bad, adverse childhood experiences and how it's affected their lives. This is Dr. Bruce Perry. And this is Oprah interviewing him and asking him a couple of questions about what happened to you. Sorry about that. Hold on just a second here. Really having trouble getting my videos to work properly. Hold on, you guys. I'm just about there. Okay, let's try him again. Come on, Mr. Perry. He's asking, what happened to you, Donna? How come this isn't working? Okay, here we go.
How is understanding what happened to a child and why a child purposely acts out? A lot of times when a teacher has a child who they feel as if it's personalized, as if this behavior is directed towards them. And in fact, it very rarely is. If the child has a history of trauma, it's because the behavior is kind of a manifestation at times of that fight or flight response. It's physical proximity, becoming evocative cue. Every time another adult gets close to me, so when the teacher comes over my shoulder to try to help me, pull up and say, get away from me. A completely predictable defensive behavior by the child. Completely behavior to the teacher. And one of the things that if we teach them about trauma and about these responses, they begin to shift the way they understand the child. They no longer take it personally. They ask what happened to you. Sometimes they may not know what happened, but they realize something did happen. And so they can then change the way they treat.
So the important thing is to remember to view the behavior as survival, not willful disobedience. What happened to them is not their fault. Well, the good news is our brain has elasticity to it, and it can be fixed. We can make growth, we can make those connections come back together. The way it happens is most importantly through resiliency. Children can heal from trauma. Please hear me. Children can heal from trauma. Healing is possible from all children, especially the vulnerable and the hurt children, if we use the right techniques. Through resilience, we can bring back health and hope. We can give them a better chance. We can harm the children centered on learning with trust and building deep emotional connections to anchor and empower them. We want to use trust-based relational intervention. We want to realize the prevalence of the trauma and the impact it's made. We want to recognize the signs and symptoms. And we want to respond by embedding knowledge into policies and practices of what needs to be done and to resist that re-traumatization. Resilience will give us help and hope. How do we make sure we have it? With resilient parents, building social connections, meeting the child's basic needs for safety, learning about parenting and how children grow. All of these can help us. One of the most successful techniques is TBRI, trust-based relational intervention. It was created by a woman, Dr. Karen Purvis, who had such an insight on what to do and how to reach children and how to help the traumatized child. She has a theory and it works. Let me share that with you.
Oh, company, so this child learns that they have a family, they learn to trust. We think the rest of them. Because there are so many children, and for those children that have to be, here's the, that we're in, they are trying because of something. The child is, has no hope. The and then college time. Yes. But the non-diagnostic. Go to the hospital. Do I look at the child? Do I touch their arm? And then talk to me about something I do. You're excited for them. I'm afraid. I'm hungry. Oh, balance. Good for you. Regular. I regulate. They're cold. They're crying. I bring myself. Regular. How does it feel sad? Distant. Awkward. Sad. So we can balance ranges. Very happy. Practice means showing the child to have faith, raising him, and showing him to him until he can get it right, and show him no fear and no shame. So we build success, not a basis of the mental health problem that we can not what we do. And we develop it.
So as you see, we can understand what causes the brain difficulties. We see that these adverse childhood experiences affect us, but we understand that we can intervene. There is hope. We can make a difference. Through my grant, I'm hoping to pass the word and to share the information with others. I empower you to do the same. I'm part of, as I mentioned, behavioral health services. These are some of our partners that we work with through behavioral health services, crisis intervention team, sheriff's department, the judges and attorneys. These people our department works with. So we're, first of all, trying to get the message out to them and sharing with them how they might use TBRI, how they might use this knowledge of brain science, and to share it with their clients, to share it with the people in their offices and with the people that they interact with. So I'm hoping to get the word out. I hope you will too. I want to share with you the Houston Juvenile Probation Department had this training, not mine specifically, but some TBRI training. And look how they've made a difference and how they've changed their policies and procedures.
The whole department is all that work that used to they are not here just because they broke the law. if they need some help. So someone has to my dream for her, I do not believe, is to give every staff to those that they will protect. And I want them to be able to reach each and every need and be able to set how they do their beliefs. And break them right.
Okay. We're still on a developmental period where if you change, if you really develop, you can find ways to act with them where we can do that. You know how it works in this environment? The children that are in facility starving for that. So many there's a relationship, there's so many of these kids, how particularly adults in authority. Hopefully, we
That with their mindset from very clear, very kind of mentality to more of a holistic feeling. I would say it's really getting them to understand where our children are. It's just the way they see a negative behavior. And instead of thinking of reaction to that behavior, they're responsible. You know, like a criminal will be a child, will be children. The kids are being punished by being taken away from their home, put in an institution or facility. They already did it. So now it's our job to figure out what's going on with them and how to keep them so they don't ever come back.
I say all the time, if you behave, some of these kids don't know exactly what they need. They're not. So we teach them why they need what they need, why they live in the behavior of themselves.
The biggest thing is the light bulb that goes off with the staff when they realize the kid isn't being bad just because he wants to, or he can't. He is not being disobedient because he's doing it. There is a reason and need behind the behavior. Figure out what that need is, then you can reach it, and that's enough.
There is a group behind any behavior of the city. The rest of we consider them all the time.
So I'm asking you today, take just any little tidbit of information I might have shared with you and go out and put on the lens of what happened to you instead of what's wrong with you. Share that information and make a difference. Go make a difference out there and go forward. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Are there questions? Yes, question from the audience.
Yeah, so I think you talked a lot about this, obviously this adversity and how we all need to be really aware of, ACEs and adversity and what happens to children, what happens to all of us, and also the compounding effects of trauma. But living in the world that we live in right now, that's not really good. And, you say a lot of children experience one of those phases. And in my world, and who I work with, and who I worked with for the past 37 years, I think children I've worked with in families probably experience 9 out of the 10. So I always look at it as a balance between adversity and protective factors. Because children are resilient. We can make a difference in what happens to children. We can make a difference between toxic stress and tolerable stress. We can't undo what's happened, to children. We can't undo the pain or the trauma, but we can definitely intervene to make a difference. You know, and I really love the presentation on TBRI and, you know, the importance of caregivers, but I think it's really important to emphasize. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that. You know, I always think about it as a scale. Like, you have more adversity, you need to have more protective factors. And as providers of services in communities, I feel that that's our role and responsibility is how do we build those protective factors to help heal, to help mitigate some of the trauma that has been experienced. So
I hope those of you virtually were able to hear the question and the comment. And it was mostly dealing with when we have so many ACEs and we have all the compounding effects of those ACEs. It goes hand in hand with the protective factors that we had during that time. And I hope I addressed that if you have the support, if you have the protective environment, if you have the skills that we just learned from TBRI, the trauma is not going to be as severe. And maybe, as the question was mentioned, maybe we can't get rid of the trauma, but we can certainly learn how to deal with it. And we can certainly learn more resilience, and we can learn how to deal with it and how to make good decisions based upon the impact we're getting from others, teaching us to understand, teaching us compassion makes a big difference. So having that support is what it's about. We can experience ACEs and not have repercussions. That can happen. And we, as we mentioned, can have past experiences that maybe did have a repercussion, but we can heal. And that's the most important part. Another question.
No, it's not a
Yes.
question. I just wanted to make a comment on what you were just saying. I think a lot of times, yes, all those ACEs make the problem more significant. But I think when it comes to treatment, it's not so much of what happened to you, but who was there when all those things happened and how did you deal with that? So it's not so much of, it is definitely significant what happened to you, but did you have support? How did you deal with that? So I think it's the pain that you go through afterward that creates significant problem with regards to regulating emotion and kind of coping and learning to build resilience.
And I hope you all virtually were able to hear that, where she made the comment that it's so important to know who was there to support you, and did you have support, and can you get support? And that support is so important. Yes, we need to be realistic, and yes, we need to be aware of the ACEs, but for treatment, it's the support that makes the difference. Were there any questions online?
I have
Oh, another question, sorry.
Yeah, just another comment, because I think it's really important about, you talked about the plasticity of the brain and the architecture of the brain and the complexity. And I think that's a really important point. And some of us that are getting older, we know that it's a little bit harder to learn things or to change our habits when we get older. And maybe our brains are a little bit more rigid. That's why early intervention is so important. And that's why starting early, because we know that, you know, we can really shape a child's brain during, and that's, you know, the research is there that 85% of the brain develops between, you know, birth and age 3. That, you know, sometimes we just hear those facts and we don't really think about what that means. That means that during those early years, you have this amazing opportunity to intervene and intervene appropriately. So I think one of the things, and I heard this phrase many years ago, we can make a difference by what we do and what we don't do. So knowing that children are at risk, knowing that certain children have more adversities, and not intervening, actually not acceptable. because we know that those are going to work. So I just wanted to emphasize that, because, you know, it's sort of like knowing the science, not doing anything like that.
So valuable. Thank you. For those that may not have been able to hear, she was making the comment of, first of all, when we understand the elasticity, the complexity, and the architecture of the brain, it's important to realize that so much of that development is made in the first few years of life. And we have to intervene with children. We cannot just look at it and accept it. We have to intervene, and how you intervene makes the difference. When we talk about equity, it's the fact that when you know a child needs so much help, you have to give that much help. Someone else might need a little less help in this area and that area, but it's important to intervene. And as she said, it's not just what we do, but it's what we don't do that can make the difference as well. So go out and make a difference. Thank you.